Godzilla has been king of the monsters since he first peeked over that hilltop in Japan, and the world's most famous kaiju is showing no signs of slowing down. But it hasn't been a straight shot for the iconic monster. Let's go all the way back to the beginning to look at the origins of Godzilla. Mankind first witnessed Godzilla's rise from the ocean depths in 1954 with the release of Ishiro Honda's Gojira. The first draft of Godzilla was inspired by the American sci-fi monster flick The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which also featured a giant dinosaur rising from the ocean to wreak havoc on the local city. And while both scripts looked similar on paper, there was one vital element that set these two movies apart: nuclear energy. At its core, Godzilla is considered a metaphor for the atomic bombings that devastated Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Echoes of the destruction reverberated in the public consciousness well through the development of Godzilla and directly influenced production. Godzilla himself is a byproduct of mankind's tampering with atomic weaponry, an abominable source of power that perverts and decays its surroundings. So, what was the next step for this emotionally packed metaphor for nuclear tragedy?
Free-for-all monster wrestling!
Toho rushed production on a sequel, Godzilla Raids Again, but instead of terrorizing mankind, Godzilla faced off against a spiky dinosaur named Anguirus, and also terrorized humanity. The film set a new precedent. From then on, Godzilla would battle other monsters. If atomic energy brought about the birth of Godzilla, then capitalism was the catalyst for his next iterations, each one shying further away from Godzilla's atomic origins. The Showa era of films that stretched through the mid-70s featured a light-hearted Godzilla that painted the giant dinosaur as humanity's defender against other kaiju, like Mothra, Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla, and more. And somewhere along the way he had a son, but don't talk about that. Having strayed too far from Godzilla's light, Toho decided to bring the franchise back to its darker roots with a reboot, 1984's The Return of Godzilla. This direct sequel to the original film ignores everything that came since the original. After all, Godzilla is a force to be reckoned with. Not whatever this is. This period, known as the Heisei era, focused on the moral issues surrounding genetics and featured the return of classic enemies, as well as the rise of new ones, like Biolante, Rodan, Destroya, and more. In 1998, Hollywood decided to produce their own take on Godzilla. Thankfully, this version spanned one bad movie, a failed animated series, and whatever this was. To celebrate 50 years of Godzilla, Toho resurrected the entertainment wrestling with a series of films that culminated with the release of Godzilla Final Wars. Then in 2014, after the dust on the franchise had settled, Warner Brothers tapped director Gareth Edwards to kick off the Monsterverse with a release simply titled Godzilla. This film introduced us to Monarch, an organization established to hunt and study mutos, or massive unidentified terrestrial organisms. Donning the hero mantle once again, Godzilla defends mankind against two mutos in a battle that culminates in San Francisco. In the ruins of the city, Godzilla is hailed as a savior, the king of the monsters. Fresh off the success of America's Godzilla, Toho announced a 2016 release for Shin Godzilla. Helmed by Neon Genesis Evangelion creator Hideaki Anno stated it was impossible to surpass the high bar set by the original Godzilla, so his aim was to reach the same bar. Instead of focusing on the nuclear tragedy of the 40s, Shin Godzilla used the recent 2011 Tohoku earthquake and Fukushima nuclear disaster as inspiration. The film was met with critical success and new life was breathed into the battle-worn franchise. The king of the monsters rose again and reclaimed his throne. But it would not go unchallenged for long. Back in the US, Warner Brothers successfully launched the second entry into their monsterverse, Kong Skull Island, which featured King Kong, Monarch, and a post-credits scene alluding to Godzilla's longtime rivals, Rodan, Mothra, and Ghidorah.
Kong
is not the only king.
And so the franchise jumped from King Kong to King of the Monsters, where we find Monarch racing to identify and study the massive creatures, some of which they're now calling the Titans. Monarch is even facing public scrutiny as more of the ancient monsters are being found. For Godzilla, though, it means officially reclaiming the throne. As an eco-terrorist group wakes up Titans across the globe, Godzilla takes down Ghidorah to earn his crown, putting him squarely back in the humanity's defender category.
Good thing he's on our side.
But the King of the Monsters' good guy status would continue going back and forth, as his attacks grow seemingly more random and ill-tempered in Godzilla vs. Kong. However, the Monsterverse would demand its two protagonists get along, and Godzilla is only a villain long enough to justify a massive fight in the neon glow of Hong Kong. Before the dust can settle, the pair team up to defeat the source of Godzilla's recent bad mood, shady corporate humans, and Mechagodzilla. But the showdown between the kings ends in a draw, with neither of the monsters needing to turn heel for good. With Monarch Legacy of the Monster set to explore the past, present, and future of the secretive organization, Godzilla's origins in this version of the story are sure to be re-examined. But meanwhile, back in Japan, Toho's Godzilla -1 seems ready to revert the kaiju back to his origins from 1954, a symbol of destruction and despair and a consequence of our own actions. Either way, the King of the Monsters has plenty of atomic breath left to leave his mark on the mainstream, and for more kaiju coverage, stay right here on IGN for the rest of Godzilla Week.